Welcome, everybody, to the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. I'm Liz Cohen, and I'm Dean of the Institute. We are very pleased to be partnering with the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the President's Commission on the Status of Women. The Kennedy Library convened a first event earlier this month with terrific panels on the commission and on its chair, Eleanor Roosevelt, as well as on the status of women today. Thanks to Tom Putnam, director of the Kennedy Library, and his staff, and to our own Rebecca Wasserman and the staff here at Radcliffe for all their hard work and collaborative efforts. If you saw our film earlier this afternoon as you were coming in, you know that the commission hoped that women would contribute more fully to American society. Ultimately, the commission's report would help spark changes in legal protections, equal pay, and education to give women more choices in their lives. And when it came to women holding political office, the commission's members acknowledged that women faced challenges combining family obligations and public service. But they hoped in time, and I quote from their report, women of demonstrated ability and political sensitivity to policymaking would seek office. Today, 50 years later, Nancy Pelosi has done them proud. It is an extraordinary honor to welcome Leader Nancy Pelosi to the Radcliffe Institute to reflect on this historic anniversary. Leader Pelosi has represented California's 12th congressional district for 26 years. In 2002, she became the first woman to lead a major political party in Congress. From 2007 to 2011, she served as the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives. And she joins us today as the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives in the 113th Congress. Leader Pelosi has famously said that all issues are women's issues. Acting on that commitment, she has spearheaded the Democratic Party's economic agenda for women and families, helping win passage of the Affordable Care Act, the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, among many others. She has been a tireless and remarkably effective advocate for all women, including mentoring other women holding public office. Leader Pelosi was recently inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York, site of the historic Women's Rights Convention in 1848. She joins us this afternoon at another landmark in American women's history. Among our many activities here at the Radcliffe Institute, we are the home of the Schlesinger Library on the History of Women in America, the preeminent manuscript archive for women's history. Our collections tell the story of women's political activism and leadership, from the suffragists to Labor Secretary Frances Perkins, Assistant Labor Secretary Esther Peterson, civil rights activist Pauli Murray, and National Organization of Women's founder Betty Friedan, among many others. And so today, Leader Pelosi adds a new chapter to that story. In just a moment, Ellen Fitzpatrick will begin the conversation with Leader Pelosi, and then we will open the floor to Q&A. Ellen is a former Radcliffe Institute fellow, a professor of history at the University of New Hampshire, and the author of numerous books on modern America. Her latest book, Letters to Jackie, Condolences from a Grieving Nation, has just been made into a stunning documentary that premieres on television in November. It is my pleasure now to introduce Tom Putnam to say a few words on behalf of the Kennedy Library.
Thank you, Dean Cohen. On behalf of Caroline Kennedy, who along with her father and eldest daughter is a proud graduate of this university and who sends her regrets for not being able to attend herself, I want to thank President Faust, Dean Cohen, and the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies for organizing and hosting today's session. I hope this collaboration, based on the complementary archival collections of our two institutions, will be the beginning of a long and fruitful partnership. Just over 1,000 days ago, a celebration occurred in the Capitol Rotunda to mark the 50th anniversary of the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy. The speakers included Vice President Biden, Senator Harry Reid, and Speaker John Boehner, among others. Nancy Pelosi came to the podium that day with a twinkle in her eye. "I've been listening very closely to all of the speeches here this afternoon," she began, "and I have yet to hear these words, 'I was there.'" Nancy Pelosi's father was a former congressman and mayor in Baltimore in January of 1961. An enthusiastic Kennedy supporter, he attended JFK's inauguration, proudly accompanied by his college-age daughter. So when Liz Cohen and I met with our respective colleagues to plan this joint conference, we thought immediately of inviting Nancy Pelosi to this signature event, which serves in part as one of the capstones to the Kennedy Library's anniversary commemorations of the accomplishments of our nation's 35th president. Allow me to highlight a few of the most recent. First, as has been mentioned, the feat which brings us here today. 50 years ago this month, President Kennedy accepted the Presidential Commission's report titled American Women, which advocated for, among other goals, equal pay for equal work. 50 years ago today, he signed his final piece of legislation, the Community Mental Health Act, providing caregiving services to people living with mental illnesses in their home communities, rather than in neglectful and often abusive state institutions. And 50 years ago this past weekend, in his last visit to Massachusetts, he gave a speech at Amherst College, our moderator Ellen Fitzpatrick's hometown, and Ellen was one of the many who turned out to see him on that day. "I look forward to a great future for America," he stated, "a future in which our country will match its military strength with its moral restraint, its wealth with our wisdom, its power with our purpose." Over the course of this past half-century, many have helped to pick up President Kennedy's fallen torch. And when it was time to wage the fight for equal pay for equal work and equal rights for all Americans, Nancy Pelosi was there. She was there to advocate for all those marginalized by our society and living in the shadows. And when times have called for a leader to guide our nation with moral restraint, wisdom, and purpose to the future that President Kennedy so eloquently described, once again, Nancy Pelosi was there and continues to be so during these turbulent days. So we thank you, Leader Pelosi, for your distinguished public service and your inspiring life example. How honored we are to have you here with us today.
I can't resist going back to this history that we just heard reference to, Leader Pelosi. And I wondered if you could talk about January 20, 1961, of being at the Kennedy inauguration and of President Kennedy's example, and whether, in fact, as a young woman, it registered upon you that American politics was a noble profession, that there was good to be done through the federal government, and whether the kind of democratic liberalism that Kennedy spoke of that day has stayed with you or shifted, changed?
Well, thank you, Ellen, for the question and for the hospitality extended here. I'm overwhelmed by Dean Cohen and Tom Putnam's words of welcome. They bring back memories and challenge conscience. And I thank you, Ellen, for your hospitality here as well, and to all who made this possible and who all brought people together over time to observe the 50th anniversary of the president signing the Equal Pay Act and all that sprang from that. Well, in order to know fully how exciting the inauguration was for me personally, if that's the question, I have to go back a little bit further. Being raised Catholic in Baltimore, Maryland, my father was the mayor, and the nuns, many of them were Boston Irish Catholic nuns, teaching in the Baltimore City Catholic schools, and all they talked about was the Kennedy family, Ambassador Kennedy. So as a girl and then as a young teenager, we had the Kennedy family on a pedestal. So one day I read that Senator Kennedy was coming to Baltimore, Maryland to speak at something called the United Nations Association dinner honoring a man named Jacob Blaustein, who was a leader in our community. And I said to my mother, I would love to go to that dinner to meet. Now I'm like a junior in high school. And my mother said, oh, I'm not feeling well that night, so perhaps you'll be able to take my place. So thank you, Mom. And now, mind you, I never wanted to go to any dinners like that. It was the 1950s. I was a teenager. I wasn't interested in public events of that kind. But so I went, representing First Lady, my mother, and sat next to Senator Kennedy, and it was quite a thrilling experience. And I have a picture in my office that has this is before he was even President of the United States, but he was so magnificent in how we spoke about our role in the world, and it was pretty thrilling. In fact, that night, there's something in those days called United Nations Youth, and in the high schools they had chapters. So at some point during the evening, while I'm sitting next to Senator Kennedy having this conversation, the United Nations Youth came to the table and they said, we'd like you to come sit with us. I don't think so. Oh, I was really torn, but I decided that I could sit with them another time. But they thought, wasn't that a lovely invitation? I was so flattered by it. And then on a number of occasions, the senator had come and campaigned for my father when he was running for office. When I was in first grade, he became mayor. When I went away to college, he was still the mayor of Baltimore. So anyway, Senator came. So I'd seen him on a number of occasions, including when he was running for president, and I was asked to be one of these people who answers the phone on TV, 3 of us answering the phones and then referring the questions. It was called Senator Kennedy Answers Your Question. So by the time and then at the convention, it was so remarkable because my father, again, was early Kennedy. He was going to be in the administration. So we were at these events, parties, I guess you would call them, in Los Angeles, and would be able to see and talk to our nominee right there, and then his beautiful. So then, the night of the nomination, the night he accepts his speech, he gives his acceptance speech for the nomination, they move it the first time, really, to the stadium. Here it was, to the stadium in Los Angeles. Tens of thousands of people came. It was a fabulous thing. He made a beautiful speech, extending his hand to all who wanted to. It was a beautiful speech. So after, I had said to my parents, I want to go to one of these restaurants that I have read about in movie magazines. They were popular in those days. And one of them is called Romanov's. There were 2 that were very famous where celebrities went. Now, mind you, I'm a young girl, so we go to Romanov's, and the first thing my father says is, look at these prices. Look at these prices. Like a shrimp cocktail in Baltimore might be half as expensive as a shrimp cocktail in Romanov's, okay? You get it, and so it looked very expensive. So as we are ordering, and wow, look at the prices, how did you ever choose this place? In comes President Kennedy with his entourage. Comes right over to the table. Tommy, how are you? How did you like my speech? And my father tells him how he likes me, says to me, and how did you like my speech? Oh my God. Price was no object after that. This is a great place. I'm glad you thought of coming here. Can you imagine? So that was another time when I had a little interaction. before. And then during the campaign, of course. But the inauguration was something so beyond. It was, well, the history tells the tale so beautifully. Cardinal Cushing, Frost poet Frost, Robert Frost speaking. It was all the best. It was fabulous. And the speech was so spectacular. So that's why 50 years later, who would ever think that I there, as you know, an enthusiastic Kennedy supporter, would be in the rotunda observing the 50th anniversary of the inauguration of President Kennedy as a former first woman speaker and as leader. It was a thrill beyond words. But to tell them about how it was when he made that speech, because it wasn't just about the fact that the oratory just elevated everything that he talked about to a high level. It was about America. It was about our country. It was about patriotism. It was about challenge. And one thing that I said that day in the rotunda, and it was that everybody talks about the citizens of America ask not what your country can do for you, but what you know that. But the very next sentence in the speech is what stuck with me. To the citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do working together for the progress of man, he said, but mankind. And that was so beautiful because it was about our role in the world in addition to our domestic responsibilities and challenges. And again, when people ask me, what do you think his contribution was? Of course it was to make politics a noble calling, public service a noble calling. That's how I was raised anyway in our home. But he made it very appealing to many more people. But it was also about America's preeminence. And later, when he did the speech to announce the project to send a man to the moon and back safely within 10 years, well, you can't even imagine how stunning that was, the man to the moon and back. I mean, none of you were born yet. You read about it in the history books, but it was my youth. And when he said that, it was like, well, that's impossible, but not for President Kennedy. And he said, if we are to honor the vows of our founders, we must be first, and therefore we intend to be first. And we were first. And that challenge to excellence is so much a part of what he was. So that day was something quite incredible. I thought the pinnacle of my political and public service involvement, just sitting there in the freezing cold and being inspired. But he inspired generations, as you know, and in a very special way. And I can't wait to talk about the bill he passed, the Equal Pay Act.
Well, let's go to that, because this has been a year of 50th anniversaries all year long. The Kennedy Library has observed these anniversaries beautifully, and we're here today to mark the 50th anniversary of the Commission on the Status of Women that President Kennedy appointed, and we're reminded as well of his signing the Equal Pay Act in the summer of '63, and also of the executive order that he issued prohibiting discrimination in hiring in the federal government. And it's wonderful that we can commemorate these events, but on the other hand, one cannot do so without a sort of bittersweet mood around it, and a reminder that many of the issues that animated these initiatives on the Kennedy administration's part are still with us. And in particular, the issue of economic inequality, not only for women, but as was in the minds of these women Democratic labor activists who pushed Kennedy in this direction. They believed that if the economic inequality that women suffered from could be addressed, that there would be a rising of a tide and that all Americans would benefit. Here we are, 50 years later, we celebrate the past, but these issues are still with us. So I wanted to ask you, a long-winded introduction, to comment really on if 50 years from now, and it's a 100-year anniversary of the Commission, what can we do today to make sure that there won't be a group like this sitting at Radcliffe and saying the job's half done.
Well, Ellen, thank you for spelling it out so clearly and the challenge that we have. When President Kennedy signed the law and issued the executive order and the rest, he probably never thought that 50 years from now we'd be having this conversation. But we are. And we have put together our initiative, as was mentioned, thank you, Liz, for mentioning that I was inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame at Seneca Falls. This year in July, on the steps of the Capitol, women members and some men joined us on the 165th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Declaration, that all men and women are created equal, honoring the vows of our founders, and as such should have opportunity equal to their station. Very similar language to what the president had in his bill and his intention. But 165 years ago, those women, they fought, they marched, they struggled, they starved, they left home, they spoke up in a living room where women weren't even supposed to speak up. They had the courage to go forward with this initiative, by and large, to get women, empower women, to have women have the right to vote. It took decades. And when women got the right to vote, finally, the headline said, "Women given the right to vote." Given? I don't think so. No, fought, for, you know, all the rest that I just said. But that was remarkable, took a long time, was a big struggle, 165 years ago. Decades from then, women were in the workforce, Rosie the Riveter helping in the war effort. After that, we had the higher education of women. Women had left home to go to the workforce. This was a very big change. Women had come into the workforce. Women were now staying in the workforce or going for higher education, women in the professions. But all the things that President Kennedy had in the bill and in the executive order, really not all of it happened. Not all of it happened. It was showcased. Eleanor Roosevelt, who, by the way, nominated Adlai Stevenson at the 1960 convention. So this was a coming together, this signing of this bill. So when I went to Seneca Falls, and before that, we said what we are doing to stand on the shoulders of these women who did so much is to have an economic agenda, an economic agenda for women and families. When women succeed, America succeeds, to your point. That's our theme. When women succeed, America succeeds. And it had 3 points which are in the spirit of what the president had in the legislation and in his comments at the time. It was about women and the balance between home and work and how you make that work. In addition to that, it was about rewarding women, valuing the work of women in the workplace. He talks in here about raising the minimum wage, some of the recommendations of the commission, raising the minimum wage. Today, 62% of the people getting the minimum wage are women. We must raise the minimum wage again. About equal pay for equal work, pay equity. We have a bill to do. We have a bill for raising the minimum wage, Pay Equity Act, at Rosa DeLaura's legislation. Why should women work for the first 3 months of the year? Free, because they make 77% of what men make doing the same job in most places in our country. So we have unfinished business, as Ellen indicated. Pay equity, raise the minimum wage, that's one, both of which were in the recommendations. Paid sick leave. We passed 20 years ago, when we observed that under President Clinton, the family and medical leave, which is a great thing. But for many people, it's unpaid leave, and people just can't afford to take a day off. They just can't. And so they're sick, or they send their children to school sick, or whatever it is, or leave a parent home, an elderly parent home sick. They don't have it. But in order to, and that helps men too. It's about family, work, balance. And the third one is and we have legislation, healthy families and all that. But the third one really will require a national crusade. And that is what is spelled out beautifully in here, and that's about affordable, quality child care, because that will unleash the power of women and families in a very important way. In the recommendations of the commission, it's about public role in affordable care and a tax credit for, and that's what we have to have. We don't have enough of that now. We have to have that. And we have legislation to that effect. But that was on President Nixon's desk in the 70s. He vetoed it for cultural reasons. And now for cultural reasons, we need to pass it again and get it signed into law. But we've had 18 meetings across the country so far since we announced this. Every time you mention affordable quality child care, everybody nods their heads because they know it is the key. And it includes Head Start, it includes President Obama's initiative for universal preschool, but it includes much more than that. And it's not just about child care, it's about elder care. It's about how you care for your family. I'll just give you two anecdotes on why this is important. One is when we were in New Haven, Connecticut, the home of Rosa DeLauro, who was the godmother of this whole thing. A young woman got up and told her story about her struggle, and now she had a job as a bus driver. And in the course of driving, she said, let me tell you what I see on the bus, a school bus driver. She said, I see moms, I know what's going to happen. I'm pulling up, the moms are crying by the roadside, bus stop. Child's getting on, I know the child's going to be sick. The mom has no options. She cannot not go to work and be docked pay. She cannot stay home from work because pretty soon she won't have a job. And she puts the child on the bus sick, who will be sick, and that is a problem. Well, she said that sometimes they throw up. I mean, it's not a pretty sight, putting a sick child on a bus. They have no option because they have no paid sick leave. How could that be in the greatest country that ever existed in the face of the earth? Then at one of our meetings at Hunter College, Donna Edwards and Doris Matsui, two members of our women's caucus, they're leaders on the co-chairs of it. We had this one at Hunter College, and this young woman gets up. She has 5 children, Hispanic woman talking about her challenges, this, that, and the other. And she said, but now I have a job, and they made me a supervisor of this, this, and this, and I'm here to talk about how important Head Start is, because without our whole theme is children learning, parents earning, and this was working for her. And so she said, so I feel so good, I'm so confident, but I was nervous about speaking before all of you at Hunter's College today, so I practiced my speech on my children. And after I was finished, my 4-year-old who's in, I asked them, do you have any questions? What do you think? Do you have any questions? And my 4-year-old who's in Head Start said, I have one question, Mom. She said, what's that? She said, who gave you permission to use my name in your speech? You go, girl. This is not about babysitting. This is about self-esteem. It's about preparing kids to do what they need to do. And we, the greatest country that ever existed in the face of the earth. Well, President Kennedy knew that. He said, children are our greatest resource and our best hope for the future. That's what he said. And we have to respect that. So this, when women succeed, America succeeds, agenda is really very important. It will lift our GDP probably 2 to 3 points. It does lift the economy to value women's work, equal pay, raise the minimum wage, paid sick leave, child care.
I'm going to ask one final quick question, and then we're going to get some questions from the students that are here, who Leader Pelosi is eager to hear your questions. When you went to be inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame, the government was in a shutdown. We're all very mindful of the political paralysis that has seemed to have settled upon Washington. And you mentioned that when you were inducted, when you became Speaker of the House and you first went to the White House, you remembered Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth. And it is the case that those 19th century feminists believed that access to political power and to voting rights were going to unlock all doors for women, and really that was the most important item on their agenda. That's right. Here we are, you're at Seneca Falls, you're being honored for your extraordinary accomplishments, but what about politics
Okay.
as a way of achieving these ends, and how can we, were they right, those feminists?
Here, I'll just give you the fuller story and then take it to where I think Ellen, the challenge that Ellen is putting forth. When I first became leader in the Congress, that is to say the leader of the House Democrats, which, by the way, are a majority of women, minorities, and LGBT community people, if you want to talk about a beautiful thing. I'm so very, very proud of that. We want more, but nonetheless. I went to this meeting at the White House that was going to be my first meeting as a leader. They had the Republicans, Democrats, House and Senate leadership with the President and the Vice President, President Bush, George W. Bush at the time. So I didn't even think about it. I've been to the White House many times as an appropriator and Intelligence Committee person, so I didn't even give it much of a thought that I should be apprehensive about this meeting. So we go to the White House, and as the door closed behind me, it was a small table where they all were, and I looked and I realized that this was unlike any meeting I had ever been to at the White House before. In fact, it was unlike any meeting that any woman had ever been to the White House before, because I was going there, my power derived from the election of my members, this beautifully diverse caucus, not by appointment of the president, so, shall we say, endorsing his point of view, but as, and so was President Bush ever gracious, welcoming my first meeting, this, that. I was sitting in the chair, and I felt really closed in. He's talking, I'm looking at him, and I'm getting all closed in on my chair, and I'm thinking, what is happening? This had never happened to me before or since. But nonetheless, I was very closed in on my chair, and I was telling this at Seneca Falls. And all of a sudden, I realized that Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Alice Paul, Sojourner Truth, they were all on that chair with me. And I could hear them say, I swear, I could hear them say, at last we have a seat at the table. And then they were gone. And all I could think was, we want more. We want more. So how do we get more? When President Kennedy signed this, there were, and I have these, so don't make any mistake, there were 18 members. In 1963, there were 18 women members in Congress, in the House. 18 members in the House, 2 in the Senate. When I went to Congress, 24 years later, in 1987, there were 23. 24 years, 5 more members, women members, 2 in the Senate, same number. That is just a stunning thing. Like just if the, back row there and over there, and then everybody else, men. Now, and I'm really happy about this, but I'm not very happy about it. I'm just happy about it. Because we made a decision, House Democrats multiplied by 5 times. We now have 62 members who are women, and the Republicans went from 11 to 19. So at least it's something. But we went 5 times. We have 62. So here's the thing. We talked about how we unleash the power of women in the workplace and how that lifts all families. And I think that, as Tom said in his remarks, will have an impact on women being able to participate in the political process. Because, as you mentioned, Liz, the president talked about, or the report talks about women having the freedom to participate in the political process. But I promise you this, I know it for an absolute fact. If you reduce the role of money in politics and increase the level of civility in politics, you will increase the number of women in public service, public office, government, across the board. And women and young people too. I mean, minorities and young people too. But if we're going to do this, and I want to acknowledge Ambassador Hunt, who is here, who has been a leader on unleashing the power of women. Thank you for being here, Ambassador Hunt. And her field is now women and security. So it's not, as we say, every issue is a woman's issue. So it's our national security, it's our economy. Of course, it's education and childcare and all the other issues as well. But they are a measure of the strength of our country as well, the well-being of the American people. but we can take on the defense of our country and the strength of our economy. But it is really important, and to that end, I have issued this DARE. Disclose, where does this special interest, unidentified, endless money come from that's being poured into the system? 2A, DA, amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United. 3, reform the political process, and we're about to put forth our proposal for fair elections, which strengthens the role of small donors in the process, diminish the role of large donors in the process. And E, empower. The empowerment piece is not only about overturning these unfair regulations and laws that suppress the vote, but it also recognizes that unlimited, unidentified, special interest money suppresses the vote too. It suffocates the airways, and it really has to be reversed if we're going to. Our founders, right here in this state, and I harken back to President Kennedy, if we are to honor the vows of our founders, he said, if we are to honor the vows of our founders, they promised their lives, their vow was, they promised their lives, their liberty, their sacred honor for a democracy, a government of the many, not a government of the money. And we must turn this back, and when we do, we will have many more women in decision-making. Sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. But we want not only the heights, we want the breadth and the depth of women empowered in our country. And that will be the most wholesome thing that we can do. So I was very proud because the day I was inducted was a Saturday, and we ended votes. 19 of my colleagues were present when I received this, and frankly, I called them on the stage and received it on behalf of them because all of the reasons I was being honored, they had played a part in my beautifully diverse Democratic caucus.
Well, that's very gracious, but we recognize you as a historic figure yourself. And so I'm going to move now to some questions, I hope, from students that are here today. And I would ask you really to make it a question and not a speech. It's incredibly tempting, I know, that to have the leader here and to want to speak. But please identify yourself, ask your question briefly, and I'll do the calling on, and the Leader Pelosi will answer. This young lady right here.
Pass it to me.
Hello.
Hello.
So as a supporter of the ACA, we know that you understand that healthcare is a right. And I come here concerned about the end of AIDS. PEPFAR is up for reauthorization soon, and it is imperative that you support putting 12 million people on treatment by 2016. But I'm mainly concerned about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is being conducted in secret.
I got it. I understand. That's a legitimate question.
Just end with a question, please.
Yes. Yeah. So the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we are very, very concerned about the impact it will have on access to medicines. And we would just like to know if you will commit to saying no to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and unmasking it and making it transparent for Congress and general public, and also to saying yes to the PEPFAR, which will lead to the end of AIDS.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the subject of PEPFAR, I don't know if you could all hear the question. It was in two parts. One was about PEPFAR, and that PEPFAR is the President Bush's initiative for drugs for HIV/AIDS throughout the world, large initiative in Africa. And it was something that I was very proud to work with President Bush on. In fact, we insisted on a higher number for PEPFAR when the president wanted to put forth the initiative, that it be, and I've visited the clinics and seen where it has worked, and it's been a wonderful thing. And yes, we will continue with PEPFAR. As far as TPP, it was Trans-Pacific. What's the initial stand for?
Trans-Pacific
Partnership. There's a trade initiative that is out there. There's one Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there's another one, is the Atlantic Partnership. I don't know which one will come first, but our members do have serious questions. When I say our members, our House Democratic members have serious questions about the TPP as to how we go forward. And it is not a popular initiative in our caucus. I'm not making any commitment to you today about whether I'm going to vote for it or against it. It depends on how we can weigh in and improve it if we can. We live in a global economy. So far, we don't like what we have seen. So far, we don't like what we have seen. First, they started by saying it's all these countries, smaller countries, and there'll be a force against some of the bigger countries. Then it was, well, the bigger countries could join. Well, then it's not the smaller countries. And then it was, well, the bigger countries are in it, would be in it, and so it just keeps growing. So we have to see how they freeze the design on what it is. But we have very serious concerns about it, about transparency, about currency manipulation and other aspects of it. And I thank you for your interest in it and bringing that here today.
Okay, can we have a question on a different subject from another student? Paul, do you want to?
Okay.
Hi, Madam Speaker.
Hello.
My name is Kennard Dillon. I'm a freshman at the college, and I hail from the Navajo Nation in Arizona. And I would like to give you immense kudos for sticking up for Native American women during the VAWA reauthorization earlier this year.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you know, but Native American women, they are, I guess, they have very low rates of education attainment. They have very low like health statistics, high rates of HIV infection, infant mortality and such. They're in a very bad position. What do you think needs to be done on reservations to empower Native American women, and what have you done so far to help empower these women?
Well, I appreciate your mentioning the Violence Against Women Act, because that was a very big fight for us, and I appreciate the previous question mentioning the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act is honoring the vows of our founders: life, a healthier life, liberty to pursue your happiness without being chained to a policy, job-locked, but really free to follow your passion. And under the Affordable Care Act, being a woman is no longer a pre-existing medical condition. So we're very happy about that. In the Affordable Care Act, we have one thing that I insisted upon having in there that some people thought, well, why are you making every fight that you... And that was the Native American Health Improvement Act, which is in the bill. We have been trying to pass that bill for a long time, and we couldn't get it passed because it was always, there were those in the Congress who always tried to tie things about women's reproductive freedom, if you know what I mean, to the bill. And it was always an obstacle to getting our passed. So when this Affordable Care Act engine was leaving the station, we wanted to be sure that the Native American Health Improvement Act is in there. And that was a very important initiative for women and men and children on the reservation. When the VAWA bill, the Violence Against Women Act, when that authorization expired, which was at least 3 years ago, when we passed it in the 90s, I was there when we passed it in the 90s under the leadership of Joe Biden, by the way, was chair of Judiciary. It was a very important initiative. It really wasn't partisan. Really wasn't partisan. But when the reauthorization came up this time, they wouldn't bring it up. 600 days went by, a whole term, the first term of the, if I may say, Republican majority went by, and they wouldn't bring it up. Then we worked together to make the issue too hot to handle, working with women from the reservations, working with women across the country, and men who were interested in ending violence against women, and that included trafficking and all that goes into that. Well, you would think, well, they weren't bringing it up 600 days, so we had to make it too hot to handle. So that's where all of you came in terms of being out there saying, bring up the violence against women, bring up the violence against, who could be against stopping violence against women? Well, the bill that they wanted to bring up said, well, we're against violence against women unless you happen to be a Native American woman, an immigrant woman, or an LGBT woman. So that was their bill. Violence against women with exception on those. I mean, don't get me started. So we said, well, that's never, we're never going to vote for that. Never, understand, never. We're never voting for that bill. So if you want to renew this, we have to have a chance to vote for our bill too, which we did. And the issue that relates to Native American women in Indian country is really important. If somebody asks, I'll go more into detail about what it does. But we were very proud that Native American women came and spoke when the president signed the bill as part of the program as to why this was so crucial. But don't listen, Kennedy Library, what I'm going to say. A big majority of Republicans voted against the Violence Against Women Act because it didn't have those 3 exceptions in it. That was really disappointing.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Tartaglia. I'm a freshman here at Harvard, and I'm thinking about concentrating in maybe government. But my question for you is what were some of the challenges you faced being both a woman and an Italian American in politics, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I appreciate the question because everyone makes a big fuss about my being the first woman Speaker of the House, but I take great pride in being the first Italian-American Speaker of the House as well. and so I did not consider them anything I had to overcome, but that they were opportunities and privileges that I had to exploit. And I would always say to anyone who feels that being a woman or whatever ethnicity you may have, that, you know, see it as your plus. And if somebody else has a problem with that, see it as their minus. You know, everybody asks me how do you have so much energy to do what you do, and I think it's largely because of my Italian-American heritage. And that and a lot of very, very dark chocolate, candy, ice cream, anything chocolate. But it is, I knew why it took a long time to have a woman speaker, because I never thought we would have a woman. I didn't set out to become a woman. I didn't even set out to run for Congress. It just so happened, but I was ready. And that's a message to all of you. You don't know what opportunity may come next. Just be ready. And don't let anybody, just to get to Alexandra's question, don't let anybody minimize who you are, because who you are is unique. Only you can make the contribution you will make. And so when you inventory your resources and you say, what do I have to offer? Take pride in absolutely every aspect of who you are. And while we all love to mentor each other this way and that, you're not imitating anybody. You may take advice, guidance, but you are who you are, and that's the best possible thing. When I ran for public office the first time, I never intended to run for public office. Never. But when I did, the best advice I got was be yourself. And for me, that was an Italian-American woman, mother of 5, married now 50 years this year. 50 years. But driven by one thing. And everybody has their passion, right? And there are many issues that we all care about, but driven by this one thing, that I had these 5 magnificent children, that I was raised in a wonderful, loving home, but that 1 in 5 and now 1 in 4 children in America lives in poverty. That large percentage of kids in our country live below the poverty line and qualify for food stamps. And there are people who want to cut them off from that. That's what drives me. In the morning, that's what I get up to do. At night, that's what I pray for, the 1 in 5. And so you have to, you're there not just to do politics. You're there for what you believe in. And you believe in something. You have a vision, an idea about something for the future. You know what you're talking about your issues of concern. You have a plan on how to get it done. You will attract support, and you will make a difference. So consider being a woman and an Italian-American. Tremendous advantages. I did.
I want to get this young woman right here who's had her hand up. Right here. Right here in the there you go.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a senior studying computer science at the college. I started Harvard Women in Computer Science a few years ago to promote technical women leadership. And some of the questions that I often get are, what does it mean to have more seats at the table? Should we be striving for 50%? And I'm wondering how you define those goals in terms of yourself. Like, do you think that we should be 50-50 in every industry, in every sector, and places where there is power?
Well, here's what I think, and I thank you for your question. I just don't understand why the Fortune 500 has about 20 women CEOs. You know it's not about a lack of talent, right? You know that the talent is there, the experience is there. So whatever the reason is, there has to be more recognition of that talent. And that's why I really do think it's important to enable women to be on track for CEO positions and the rest. And what we talked about earlier, when women succeed, America succeeds. Pay equity, recognition for the role that women play, and the knowledge that when a woman is at work and intensely in a competitive arena and the rest, she knows that her children are cared for. You're always thinking about what's happening with your kids, but nonetheless, if there's affordable quality child care, so women can move up in the ranks. I think this is really essential. Why do I think that, with no disrespect for any of the intellectual resources, et cetera, that men bring to the table, I think the beauty is in the mix. It's not that women are better than men in every respect. Just kidding, just kidding. It's just that the difference of opinion is really important. And it's really important for young women to see other women at the table who have shared their experience, who have shared their, whether they're a student, whether they're a young working mom, whatever it is, it's somebody who identifies with their experience, with their generation, with their gender, is at that table. And when I talked about our House Democratic Caucus being a majority of women, minorities, and LGBT, I can apply that to the table of chairmen. Well, hopefully we'll be chairman soon, but our ranking members, the ones who were chairman in the last Congress when we had the majority. The majority of people at that table of chairmen were women or minorities or LGBT. So it's not just having a seat at the table, it's having a seat at the head of the table. Now, I said to you before, I never thought there would be a woman speaker. I thought we'd have a woman president first, because the American people are so far ahead in their thinking about the value of women and their contribution. The Congress of the United States is a male bastion. It wasn't breaking the glass ceiling, it was breaking the marble ceiling. The marble ceiling. And so first, as I said, I didn't even think to run for Congress, much less than to run for leadership, but people encouraged me, blah, 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 and here I am. So, so the fact is that I do think, again, the individual contribution that people make, it's a different experience for women than it is for men in many respects. And there's a certain, if I may, Tom, just say, intuitive sense that women have. Maybe it's just about the use of time. What did we come here to do? What is our goal? What is our purpose? Let's get the job done so that we can get on to other things, like the future. And so that intuition, that's a real thing with women. And that intuition is based really on what your purpose is, what you know about, what I talked about before. What is your vision, your passion? What is your knowledge about it? What is your judgment? And that judgment is that intuitive sense that you're going to act. And when people know you're going to act, they will respect that. If they think you're going to sit around and listen for, 10 more months about one option or another, your options will be greatly diminished. Observe, think, act. Women know how to do that very well. So I think that while we would like to have 50%, why should we limit ourselves to that? Let us limit ourselves to the talent, to the opportunity, to the willingness of women to put themselves on the line. This is not for the faint of heart. Either whether to become a CEO or to become an elected official, this is not for the faint of heart. this takes, put yourself on the line is difficult. So if you have to know why you are doing it, and with that confidence, to just be ready for what opportunities will come along. I hope that many women here, young women and young men too, will consider as public service as the noble calling that President Kennedy inspired in all of us of another well, actually it's like 2 generations ago now, but it was a beautiful, wonderful thing. We're very proud of our president that we have now, and his call to service and his respect for public service as a noble calling as well. Do we have one more question? Is that
I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, all of you. I'm sure we could go on much, much longer, but it's wonderful to end on that note with a call to action to these young people here today.
Well,
and
let
if
me
you
thank you, Ellen. I want to thank
something
Ellen
final.
for her leadership at the Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study. I thank Liz Cohen, the dean, for her leadership in the invitation to be here and kind words. Tom Putnam at the Kennedy Library. I worship at that shrine because, granted, it was about something that we lived through at a susceptible time, and now all of the history that has sprung from it. And that great president, that great young president. I'll just tell you this one story because we're in Massachusetts. When Senator Kennedy passed away, he wrote a letter to President Obama, and it was about the Affordable Care Act, which I think is fabulous despite some of the glitches right now. And he said this, and it was about passing the Affordable Care Act and why he wanted that to happen as the great unfinished business of our society, that everybody would have a right to affordable quality health care. It would be a right for all Americans, not just a privilege for those who could afford it. And he said something like this. He said, when I came into politics, a new young president was in the White House. He gave hope to future generations, and he inspired other nations. As I leave, another young president is in the White House, inspiring future generations and giving hope across the world. That gave him confidence that good things would happen next. So you, the next generation, you have enormous responsibilities. You are messengers to the future some of us will never see. You will have technologies and communication and opportunities that we can't even imagine. But the value of what President Kennedy did, imagine sending a man to the moon and back, unimaginable to us at the time. Like magic, how could it be? Honoring the vows of our founders, hearkening back, but understanding our responsibilities to the future. It's just wonderful, the opportunities you have, and I hope that some of you will bring your talent, your passion, your values to public service. It is a noble calling, and President Kennedy made it so for so many of us. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.